these markings on the ground here in the mountains of Ararat, that these are the last remnants of Noah's Ark, kind of shipwrecked, if you like, here on this mountainside.
Scientists investigating the controversial Noah's Ark site near Mount Ararat in Turkey say new evidence has brought the mystery back into global headlines. For decades, the Durupınar Formation has divided archaeologists, researchers, and believers alike. Many dismissed it as a natural rock formation. Others argued it deserved a closer look. Now, claims that investigators have finally reached parts of its hidden interior are fueling fresh debate. What was reportedly found hidden in this site? Was it truly Noah's Ark interior? The mountain mystery. The argument starts with a shape, not a relic pulled from the ground or a forgotten manuscript hidden in an archive, but a massive boat-shaped formation sitting on a mountainside in eastern Turkey, quietly attracting attention decade after decade. Known as the Durupınar Formation, the site lies roughly 18 miles south of Mount Ararat, the mountain long associated with Noah's Ark in biblical tradition. According to repeated reporting by Fox News and the Jerusalem Post, the formation stretches about 538 feet in length and has become one of the most famous locations ever connected to the search for the Ark. Yet what makes the story remarkable isn't simply the shape itself, it's the fact that the debate has refused to die. The formation first entered public attention after aerial surveys in the region revealed an outline that many people thought looked strikingly similar to a giant ship. Since then, researchers, explorers, filmmakers, religious groups, skeptics, and curious tourists have all taken turns examining the site. Every few years, a new claim emerges, a new survey, a new theory, a new documentary. Then the cycle begins again. Here's where things get interesting. Most archaeological mysteries fade when evidence fails to appear. Public interest moves on. Funding dries up. Researchers look elsewhere. The Durupınar Formation did the opposite. Even after decades of criticism from geologists who argue the structure is a natural geological formation, the site kept returning to the spotlight. Part of that persistence comes from how unusual the formation looks. People see the outline and immediately make the same connection. The resemblance is difficult to ignore. Another reason is cultural. Noah's Ark isn't just an archaeological question, it's one of the most famous stories on Earth. Any location that appears to match that story instantly attracts attention from believers hoping for confirmation and skeptics looking for flaws. And that's exactly what happened here. One side points to the site's dimensions, location, and recurring scan results as reasons the formation deserves further investigation. The other side argues that unusual geology can easily create shapes that seem meaningful, and that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Decades later, neither side has completely convinced the other. Think about that for a second. Entire generations of researchers have entered this debate, believing they might finally settle it. Yet the mountain remains exactly where it has always been, outlasting headlines, theories, and predictions. The mystery itself has become part of the site's identity. That endurance may explain why people keep clicking whenever the Durupınar Formation appears in the news. The story isn't new, the location isn't new, the disagreement isn't new. What changes are the tools being used to examine it. And once a site has survived decades of ridicule, fascination, belief, and doubt, the only thing capable of changing the conversation is evidence that appears more technical than theatrical. So what exactly did the latest scans claim to reveal beneath the surface? The scans. The conversation changed the moment researchers stopped talking about what could be seen on the surface and started talking about what might be hiding underneath it. For decades, critics and supporters of the Durupınar Formation argued over the same visible shape. One side saw a ship-like outline. The other saw an unusual but entirely natural geological feature. The debate seemed locked in place. Then a new wave of scanning projects pushed the story back into international headlines. According to recent reporting by Fox News and the Daily Mail, research teams associated with ongoing investigations at the site used subsurface imaging techniques designed to look beneath the ground without large-scale excavation. These methods, often compared to radar-style surveys, are commonly used to identify buried features, density changes, and hidden structures that cannot be detected from the surface alone. And that distinction matters. A photograph can be dismissed as an optical illusion. A strangely shaped hill can be explained away as a coincidence. But when scans begin producing measurements, depth readings, and internal patterns, the discussion suddenly feels more scientific. Whether those patterns actually mean what researchers think they mean is a separate question. Yet the language of scanning technology naturally grabs attention because it suggests precision. According to reports describing the findings, investigators claimed to identify what appeared to be organized anomalies beneath portions of the formation. Some interpretations pointed to possible compartment-like features, internal divisions, and linear patterns that supporters argued looked difficult to explain as random geology. The Daily Mail reported that researchers also discussed tunnel-like formations and spaces that appeared distinct from the surrounding terrain. Now here's where things get interesting. None of those observations automatically proves the presence of an ancient vessel. A scan does not reveal a finished answer. It reveals differences beneath the ground. The challenge comes afterward, when researchers attempt to interpret what those differences actually represent. Imagine looking at a medical scan without knowing whether you're seeing healthy tissue, scar tissue, or something else entirely. The image may be real, but the meaning remains open to debate. The same problem exists here. Supporters of the Noah's Ark hypothesis argue that the reported patterns appear too organized to ignore. They point to recurring scan results and the apparent symmetry of some detected features as reasons the site deserves continued investigation. According to coverage of the project, researchers involved with the work believe the anomalies justify additional study and potentially more advanced surveys in the future. But skeptics see the situation differently. Many geologists have long argued that unusual underground signatures can occur naturally. Rock layers, erosion patterns, landslides, and geological processes can produce shapes that appear structured when viewed through certain imaging techniques. Without excavation, independently reviewed data, and broader scientific consensus, they argue that extraordinary interpretations remain speculative. Think about that for a second. Both sides are looking at the same reported scans, yet arriving at very different conclusions. One group sees possible evidence of something hidden. The other sees data that has not crossed the threshold from interesting to convincing. And that's exactly why the story exploded again. The scans created something the mystery had been missing for years, a fresh layer of evidence that sounded technical enough to attract serious attention, while remaining ambiguous enough to fuel endless debate. Nobody could point to a recovered ark. Nobody could declare the case closed. Yet suddenly, people had new images, new measurements, and new claims to argue over. But radar-style surveys alone do not tell the whole story, because the next claims move beyond shape and structure toward questions of material evidence. What may actually be buried here? The soil beneath the surface. The debate took another turn when researchers stopped focusing on shapes altogether and started talking about what was happening in the ground itself. If the recent scans were enough to reignite interest in the Durupınar Formation, the next set of claims helped push the story even further. Suddenly, the conversation wasn't just about outlines, tunnels, or possible compartments. It was about soil samples, chemical signatures, and vegetation patterns that some investigators believe could point to something unusual beneath the surface. According to reporting discussed by the Jerusalem Post and widely circulated across social media and video coverage, researchers involved with the site have argued that the soil within the boat-shaped formation appears different from the surrounding area. Some reports describe variations in mineral composition and organic content. Others point to differences in plant growth across parts of the formation. At first glance, that may not sound particularly dramatic, but here's why people pay attention to those details. Archaeologists often look for changes in soil because buried structures can alter the environment around them. A wall, foundation, chamber, or long-decayed object can affect how water moves through the ground. It can change nutrient distribution. It can even influence the kinds of plants that grow above it. When investigators discover an area behaving differently from nearby terrain, they naturally start asking questions. Supporters of the Noah's Ark hypothesis argue that this is exactly what may be happening at Durupınar. According to claims shared through recent coverage, some researchers believe the reported soil differences could be consistent with the presence of buried materials or ancient structural remains. Others have suggested that variations in vegetation growth may indicate subsurface features affecting the landscape from below. Combined with the scan results discussed in the previous chapter, these observations are often presented as pieces of a larger puzzle rather than isolated discoveries, and that combination is important. A strange shape alone can be dismissed as a coincidence. An unusual scan can be explained in different ways. But when people hear about shape, scans, soil anomalies, and vegetation differences all at the same time, the story begins to feel more persuasive. Each individual claim may remain uncertain, yet together they create the impression that multiple lines of evidence are pointing in the same direction. Think about that for a second. Human beings are naturally drawn to patterns. When several unusual details appear to overlap, it's tempting to view them as confirmation that a hidden explanation exists. Sometimes that instinct leads to genuine discoveries. Other times, it encourages people to connect dots that only appear related. That's where the Durupınar debate becomes especially difficult. None of the reported soil findings proves that an ancient vessel is buried beneath the formation. Differences in chemistry can result from numerous environmental factors. Variations in vegetation may have geological explanations. Even if the measurements themselves are accurate, interpretation remains the central challenge. The distinction between what is measured and what is inferred matters enormously. Researchers may detect real differences in the ground. The question is whether those differences point to a remarkable archaeological structure or simply reflect natural processes that are not yet fully understood. Those are very different conclusions, and the available public evidence has not resolved the disagreement. That is why this mystery spreads so quickly online. Every new detail sounds as though it could be the missing piece that finally explains everything. But have people been shown evidence that speaks for itself? Or have they mostly been shown interpretations of evidence that still require a leap of faith? Why the world couldn't stop talking about it. Millions of people were discussing the Durupınar Formation again before most of them had even seen the underlying data. That's what makes this chapter of the story so fascinating. By the time the latest scan claims began circulating online, the mystery already possessed something most archaeological discoveries never achieve: a built-in audience. People weren't encountering an unfamiliar excavation or a newly discovered ruin. They were encountering Noah's Ark, one of the oldest and most recognizable stories in human history, suddenly appeared connected to new technology, hidden structures, and the possibility of a breakthrough. And that's an incredibly powerful combination. Think about how the story is usually told: a remote mountainside, a formation that resembles a giant vessel, decades of arguments. Maybe researchers are carrying advanced equipment into the field, reports of hidden chambers, unusual readings and features concealed beneath the surface. Then comes the suggestion that investigators may have finally reached something previously inaccessible. Whether those claims ultimately prove correct is almost secondary to the emotional impact of the narrative itself. The structure of the story feels cinematic from beginning to end. First comes mystery, a strange formation sitting in one of the most famous regions associated with the Ark tradition. Then comes authority. Researchers, surveys, scans, measurements, and technical language that imply scientific investigation rather than speculation. Next comes tension. Supporters and skeptics disagree over what the evidence means. Finally comes the revelation. New claims suggest that something hidden may have been detected beneath the surface. That's the same storytelling framework used in countless adventure films, treasure hunts, and historical mysteries. Except this time, the object at the center of the story isn't fictional. It's a real location that people can point to on a map. Here's the thing. Most archaeological discoveries arrive wrapped in uncertainty. Scientists publish cautious reports. Researchers discuss probabilities and limitations. Conclusions remain provisional. That's how serious an investigation works. But viral stories tend to move in the opposite direction. Online audiences are naturally drawn toward moments that feel decisive. Hidden chamber discovered, lost structure detected, secret revealed. The wording creates the impression that a threshold has been crossed, that investigators have finally stepped beyond decades of speculation into something concrete. According to the coverage and social media discussions surrounding the latest claims, much of the excitement came from language suggesting access to previously hidden features. For many viewers, that idea transformed the story from another round of debate into what felt like the opening scene of a major discovery. And that's where the emotional weight becomes impossible to ignore. People have searched for Noah's Ark for generations. Entire books, documentaries, expeditions, and research projects have been built around the possibility. The mystery has survived long enough to become part of popular culture itself. Every new claim arrives carrying the accumulated expectations of decades. Imagine inheriting a question that your grandparents heard about when they were young, only to be told that modern technology may finally be uncovering answers. Even cautious observers can feel the pull of that possibility. But stories become most persuasive when they combine mystery with apparent evidence. The scans, the soil claims, the structural interpretations, and the language of hidden interiors all work together to create the feeling that something significant is happening. Yet every viral mystery eventually encounters the same obstacle. The atmosphere can attract attention. Suspense can keep people watching. But what can actually be proven? The problem with proof. The strongest criticism of the Noah's Ark site isn't that nothing unusual exists there. It's that the evidence being presented and the conclusions being drawn may not be the same thing. That's an important distinction, because many of the people questioning the recent claims are not dismissing the Durupınar Formation as uninteresting. In fact, some critics openly acknowledge that the site is unusual enough to warrant study. The disagreement begins when observations are transformed into certainty. According to fact-check reviews and critical analyses that have examined the latest wave of Ark headlines, the central issue is not whether scans detected anomalies or whether soil differences exist. The issue is whether those findings justify claims that the remains of Noah's Ark have been identified. And that's a much higher standard. Archaeology rarely works through dramatic announcements alone. Finding something unusual is one thing. Convincing everyone you've found what you think you've found is something else entirely. The people pushing back aren't necessarily saying the scans are fake or that the site isn't worth studying. They're asking a simpler question. What exactly has been shown to the public? Most people haven't seen mountains of technical data. They've seen headlines, interviews, presentations, and summaries of what researchers say the results mean. And that's important because archaeology has a long history of discoveries that looked convincing at first, only for other experts to come along later and offer a completely different explanation. Until the underlying evidence can be examined, debated, and tested from multiple angles, Critics argue that it's difficult to know whether the excitement is coming from the data itself or from the interpretation attached to it. That doesn't automatically mean the claims are wrong. It simply means they remain unproven. Think about that for a second. A promising lead and a confirmed discovery can look surprisingly similar in the early stages. Both involve intriguing evidence. Both generate excitement. Both attract attention. The difference is that one survives rigorous examination while the other eventually falls apart. Supporters of the Durupınar hypothesis often point to the cumulative weight of the observations, the shape, the scans, the soil differences, the vegetation patterns. Viewed together, they argue, the evidence deserves serious consideration. Skeptics look at the same collection of claims and reach a different conclusion. They argue that multiple uncertain observations do not automatically become proof when combined. If each piece remains open to alternative explanations, the larger conclusion remains uncertain as well. And that's why the debate has lasted so long. A site can be fascinating without being confirmed. It can be worthy of investigation without becoming a discovery. The Durupınar Formation occupies that uncomfortable space between possibility and proof, where every new claim generates excitement and every unanswered question keeps the controversy alive. What makes the mystery so enduring is that neither side has completely closed the case. Believers see reasons to keep looking. Skeptics see reasons to remain cautious. And that brings us to the hardest question of all. If the evidence still falls short of proof, why does this site keep producing claims that sound as though confirmation is always just one step away? The mystery that refuses to end. The most surprising thing about the Durupınar Formation may not be what lies beneath it. It may be the fact that people are still arguing about it after all these years. Most mysteries eventually fade. Evidence accumulates. Questions get answered. Public interest moves on. Yet this site continues to pull people back because it exists at the crossroads of three powerful forces: history, faith, and science. For some, the formation represents the possibility that an ancient story could leave traces in the modern world. For others, it is a fascinating geological puzzle that has been repeatedly stretched beyond what the evidence can support. Between those positions sits a growing collection of scans, measurements, samples, and interpretations that keep the conversation alive without bringing it to a final conclusion. And maybe that's why the story remains so compelling. According to recent reporting by Fox News and coverage of the latest investigations, researchers believe the site still deserves further study. At the same time, critics continue to argue that the available evidence falls short of proving the extraordinary claims often attached to it. Think about that for a second. Decades after the formation first attracted worldwide attention, the central question remains remarkably unchanged. Not because nobody has looked, but because nobody has found an answer that satisfies everyone. Some stories survive because they are solved. Others survive because they aren't. The Durupınar Formation remains suspended between possibility and proof, carrying just enough mystery to keep each new generation looking one more time. Perhaps another scan, another drill sample, or a future excavation will change the conversation completely. Until then, the mountain keeps its secret, and that unanswered question may be the very reason the story refuses to disappear. New scans, unusual subsurface patterns, and reported soil anomalies have brought the Noah's Ark site back into global focus. But what do you think is really beneath the Durupınar Formation? What evidence would finally settle the debate? And are we looking at a discovery or a mystery still unfolding? Share your thoughts in the comments.